Welcome to this session hosted by AFSA's Healthy Soil, Healthy Food Initiative. AFSA is the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, for those who don't know it. It's a continental network of networks, an alliance, a social movement, a platform, and it's growing pretty fast, and its reach is quite big now. We have 3 presenters who come from organizations that are amongst the pioneers of this new and ambitious Healthy Soil, Healthy Food initiative from AFSA. All presenters are primarily practitioners, not researchers. They work very closely with farmers in advancing agroecology and have done for many years. Our presenters are Ferdinand Guaffula from Western Kenya, Claude Asen Savadogo from Burkina Faso, and Sam Nyanzi from Uganda. I'm afraid we have apologies from Mariama Sonko in Senegal, which is a great pity given the work she and her organization, We Are the Solution, have been doing. It would have been really good to have her on. Unfortunately, she has a nasty cold and it's turned into a bad cough, and she's been running training programs, and she has wisely decided to rest from yesterday. So that's fully understood, but I'm very sorry she can't be with us. Let me very briefly give some background to the Healthy Soil, Healthy Food initiative, and thus to the presentations. Some people amongst AFSA members realized that a lot of work had been going on during the last 20 or so years in the use of biofertilizers, bioinoculants, biostimulants. You saw in the film we've just watched that they're using them in Latin America. And a lot of this work had been happening in places like Latin America, including as part of Cuba's transition away from chemical agriculture, also in Korea, Japan, India. That whole realm of increasing microbe diversity in the soil towards soil health and using microbes in things like fermentations to make biofertilizers. Somehow we had largely missed out on that work in our agroecological work here in Africa. Through connections, we linked up with people in Latin America, and then in October 2017, AFSA hosted Jairo Restrepo from Colombia to run a training program for around 55 farmers and NGO field staff at Thika in Kenya. There was no waiting for research or researchers to say, this works, go ahead. This was practitioners wanting to learn from other practitioners and then try for themselves. And that's how agroecology has been advancing since the 1980s across Africa, largely independent of the world of agricultural research. One could say even in spite of this research world. Agroecological practitioners have, however, often given strong recognition to indigenous knowledge and practices. Unfortunately, the African context of recent decades has been one in which the agricultural research world has been strongly supportive of, even obsessed with, the Green Revolution approach. Following the Thika workshop in 2017, there were a number of such workshops in West, East, and Southern Africa in 2018 and 2019. There was enthusiastic uptake by farmers working with people like those on this panel. And out of all this grew AFSA's Healthy Soil, Healthy Food initiative, which I would say focuses on the broad realm of healthy soil, healthy food, healthy soil in particular, of which biofertilizers, bioinoculants, and biostimulants are just one part. But that's what we'll be focusing on here, to share how that has come here and how to spread. So now I'd like to go over to our presenters to give you their experience and perspectives. Ferdinand Guaffula just a little background, attended Manor House's training in the early 90s, worked for a community-based NGO in Western Kenya, and then set up his own community-based NGO called Biogardening Initiatives, which he's been running for a number of years. Claude Arsène Savadogo is the founder of Bioprotect, an economic interest group active in the promotion of agroecology through the development of organic inputs and the sustainable development of agroecological markets. Sam Nyanzi is one of the pioneers of promoting agroecology in Uganda, long before it was known as agroecology. Many years ago, he set up and continues to run Rusud near Mityana. Rusud runs a 2-year organic farming training program for young people, as well as working with farmers in their neighboring area and running a fruit processing unit. So now let me hand over to Ferdinand, and then it will go to Claude Arsène, and then to Sam. So over to you, Ferdinand.
Cool. So much honor and gratitude for this opportunity as we join other global citizens in sharing work related to healthy soil, healthy food using biofertilizers, and organic and agroecology principles. When introduced to biofertilizers, we noted the missing gaps. We realized that within the tools that we are using, we had the compost making, animal manures, crop rotations, agroforestry, green manures, and fallow spaces. And there were still some gaps with these. And when we look at the emerging strategies, largely supported through the trainings that we had bokashi making and fermented foliar fertilizers. We also are learning about biochar making, vermicomposting, seed coating, and pelleting. But I want to focus more on bokashi making and fermented foliar fertilizers and the trials that we did with farmers. We realized that fermentation processes and combination of different materials to make bokashi has made a very big difference. And this is one of the tools that we did a lot of our work, and we are still doing more trials. Next slide, please. The workshops and the trainings from our friends from South America enabled us to bring just these more tools, bringing science alive, understanding what fermentation is all about, because farmers have knowledge about fermentation, and just bringing that knowledge into the agroecology practice was so exciting for the farmers, and doing some practicals together with them generated a lot of interest for us to do trials. Next slide, please. So looking at healthy soils, we focusing much on microbial life, minerals, and organic matter. And these are the components that we are enriching when we talk about the bokashi and mineral availability in the soil, and a balance of this is actually what creates soil fertility. Next slide, please. So part of our trainings has been to, and practice is actually to collect leaves, fermented leaves, and from the forest, and understanding the relationship between microbes, relationship between plants and the decaying matter, and that this is the source, which in many cases has always been destroyed with chemical agriculture. But the relationship of these microbes and the availability of these microbes is actually what drives, what makes the soil living. And that is now very important concept within the agroecology movement. Next slide, please. So when we relate these living systems into bokashi making and solid native microbes, and then adopt locally available materials like mulching, and also making our own recipes with farmers, that has enriched our learning process and also our practice. Next slide, please. So with our field trials, we've done germination counts. We were doing height measurements, leaf size and color, pest and disease prevalence, and doing it in a participatory manner. And we've been following the seasons. And we've observed when using bokashi, for instance, that the leaves of our crops and maize in particular actually are very broad compared to other recipes. And even the maize is filled, all the cob is filled. And that has really excited many of the farmers, and when we are doing those trials. Next. And we also have done counts on beans, for example, under normal conditions, or for the control where you only have 3 seeds. When we're using biofertilizers, and especially bokashi, we count 6, about 2 times more. And also farmers are able to now even measure just to see the difference. And that gives a lot of information and confidence. Next. So we were doing our own analysis and comparisons. And here we just started in 2018, immediately after we had the training in the late season of 2017. And when comparing bokashi, compost, and having control, we noted, for instance, that we had an average of 8 kilograms in a 3 by 4 meter space, compared to just 1 on control. And also compost performed quite well. And we had some farmers doing alongside our own as an organization. And some farmers even outperformed what our organizational fields were looking like. Next slide, please. And then on pests and disease counts, we noted that we had a lot of the armyworm, and that having bokashi and some of those biostimulants that we are using seem to give plants more vigor, that they are able to resist. That was just our conclusion. And because we had very few counts on bokashi plots compared to the control plots. And when just doing our estimates and our counts with farmer, we noted that the control had about 59% and bokashi about 3%. And this actually has excited farmers and excited us, so that we really want to keep on trying and understanding the application of these biofertilizers. And I think we're getting a lot of information out of this. Next slide, please. And then when doing much more trials in a short season and increasing just the number of trial fields, we still continued to make comparison in terms of germination and cob formation and the yields. And we noted that, for instance, where germination rates for control was quite good, even compared to bokashi. But then when coming to cob formation and and the general health and harvests, you noted that bokashi outperformed all the rest. And this has informed us. And we are using this and as a tool to do extension so that farmers can be able to just make these comparisons and have confidence in what they're doing when we are training on biofertilizers and agroecology, and that is moving on. Yes, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the responses we're seeing is that the short duration of processing bokashi compared to composting has enticed them, and they feel that that is a good tool. And if you have tools that are easy to reach, I mean, that would really excite you in doing better work. And then the wide range of alternatives and materials that are locally available was also so enticing to farmers. And then farmers now urge us to continue doing the trials and experimentation just out of that inquisitive mind, because neighbors are aware and now are raising concern and asking what happened, how did you plant, and and we feel that that's a very important tool in our extension. And we see that farmers' confidence when we're doing these trials, that also increases. Yes, next, please. So we've learned that it's good for practitioners to have hands-on translation of scientific concepts and use this when interacting with farmers. Also, continuous capacity building and networking builds more confidence in terms of sharing knowledge. And again, just keep experimenting. We feel that it's worth the effort and doing trials and learning from others and improving. Yes, next, please. Very grateful for McKnight Foundation and AFSA for also enabling us to share this knowledge, and thank you so much.
Great, thanks a lot, Ferdinand, for that. Let's go straight over to Claude Arsène. Claude Arsène, if you'd like to begin, and I'm sure Felix will share your presentation.
Alors, merci. Vous pouvez. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis très heureux d'être là. Je suis Claude Arsène Savatogo de Bioprotect. Voilà. Donc, je suis content de présenter ce que nous faisons. Voilà. On peut avancer. Alors, déjà, ce que je peux dire, c'est que Bioprotect a été créé face à plusieurs constats. D'abord, le premier constat, c'est celui de la dégradation des sols, qui fait que les rendements sont de plus en plus croissants alors que la population est de plus en plus croissante. À cela s'ajoute l'utilisation maladroite et abusive des pesticides chimiques et des engrais qui détruisent davantage le sol et le peu de ressources que nous avons. Tout ça, des intrants locaux, organiques, pour permettre de régénérer les sols et réduire l'infestation liée aux parasites et aux microbes. Voilà. Donc, c'est ainsi que, on peut passer à la slide suivante, c'est ainsi que, justement, la collaboration avec la recherche nous a permis de mettre au point un certain nombre de produits. Voilà, slide suivante, s'il vous plaît. Voilà. Donc, ces travaux nous permettent justement de proposer des solutions qui, pour nous, doivent recouvrir trois dimensions. Le premier, c'est la dimension économique. Il faut que les solutions agroécologiques que nous proposons soient économiquement viables pour permettre justement aux producteurs de tirer un intérêt et un gain financier pour leur permettre de continuer. Soit écologiquement saines, et le moins d'impact possible sur l'environnement et la santé des consommateurs, et soit socialement acceptable. Il faut que les innovations se retrouvent au fait dans le cursus des producteurs pour qu'ils puissent les intégrer. Donc, pour cela, nous passons par des champs de démonstration dont l'image est présentée ici, démonstration de production de tomates écologiques en saison de pluie avec les intrants que nous avons mis au point pour justement montrer aux agriculteurs qu'il est possible de produire de la tomate en saison de pluie sans avoir recours à des engrais chimiques et des pesticides chimiques, avoir de bons résultats. La slide suivante. Voilà, donc comme je disais tantôt, nous travaillons énormément avec les micro-organismes, mais nous nous sommes efforcés de travailler sur un en particulier, le Trichoderma azarnium. Pourquoi nous avons décidé de travailler sur ce micro-organisme-là, ce champion, c'est justement par sa diversité en termes d'action, en termes d'abord de dégradation de la matière organique. On sait que dans nos pays, le compostage est une activité qui est difficilement mise en œuvre à cause de plusieurs facteurs, le manque d'eau, le manque de... Donc, s'il est aussi de compostage en ajoutant des micro-organismes, sa capacité aussi à lutter contre les champions du sol, les maladies fongiques du sol. Donc, l'utiliser permet justement de réduire tout ce qui est l'utilisation de produits chimiques pour l'enrobage des semences, etc., mais d'arriver à des solutions qui soient beaucoup plus durables, beaucoup plus écologiques. Sa capacité à stimuler la défense naturelle des plantes, voilà, et sa capacité à solubiliser les nutriments qui sont contenus dans la matière organique. Donc, ce qui fait que en l'utilisant, on permet aux producteurs d'augmenter justement les rendements tout en réduisant, en abandonnant l'utilisation des intrants chimiques de synthèse. Donc, pour ce faire, nous travaillons pas, comme je disais, nous essayons de travailler sur des thématiques de recherche avec les producteurs. Suivant. Voilà. Alors, ces travaux nous ont permis justement de mettre au point plusieurs formules, plusieurs produits que voici qui sont commercialisés et dont certains sont en phase d'être homologués par le comité de Pacifique. C'est l'organisation du pays, des membres des pays du CILS, du comité inter-État de lutte contre la sécheresse dans le Sahel, qui homologue les intrants, notamment les pesticides, au profit des États et au profit des agriculteurs. Donc, nous espérons également par ce biais-là proposer des solutions locales pour permettre une utilisation massive de ces solutions alternatives aux pesticides chimiques de synthèse. Donc, il faut dire que l'ensemble de ces produits utilisent des substances naturelles. J'ai parlé tantôt du trichoderma, mais aussi nous utilisons des extraits de plantes, dont notamment le Nîmes, le piment, les huiles essentielles que nous fabriquons nous-mêmes pour formuler une diversité de biopesticides que nous mettons à la disposition des producteurs et des acteurs de l'agriculture. Suivant. Alors, ça, c'est quelques résultats de nos travaux de recherche. Donc, vous voyez en haut, tout à gauche, au fait, nous avons essayé de comparer le bokashi avec le compost simple et avec le compost enrichi au trichoderma. Donc, on voit au fait l'effet de ce champignon bénéfique en termes de solubilisation des nutriments. On voit que justement, ajouter le champignon trichoderma permet de multiplier pratiquement par 2 les teneurs en nutriments contenus dans la matière organique. Donc, ce qui est un bon pas et dans certains cas, pratiquement par 10. Donc, ce qui permet vraiment aux producteurs en utilisant d'avoir une sorte d'engrais, voilà, même si c'est de la matière organique, ce qui est très intéressant pour justement le développement de la production et la productivité. Nous voyons également l'effet justement de ce trichoderma sur la solubilisation du phosphore. Au Burkina, le phosphore est un facteur limitant parce que les sols sont tellement dégradés et carencés en phosphore que ça devient un facteur limitant. Donc, on voit que lorsqu'on ajoute le trichoderma justement dans le compost et la matière organique, on a une solubilisation du phosphore qui est directement plus assimilable au profit de la plante. Donc, nos thématiques de recherche que nous faisons portent surtout sur la gestion de la fertilité des sols, qui est importante, la lutte contre les ravageurs, une lutte de façon écologique, mais aussi les systèmes de production végétale. Comment on va réussir à associer plusieurs producteurs, la méthode push-pull, pour pouvoir justement réduire l'utilisation des intrants, même si c'est écologique, tout en accroissant la symbiose entre les différents éléments de la nature. Suivant. Alors, notre méthodologie de recherche, comme je disais, nous sommes dans un processus de recherche axé sur le besoin des utilisateurs. Donc, nous ne faisons pas, nous travaillons beaucoup avec les producteurs. Comment ça se passe? Les producteurs, justement, identifient les problèmes auxquels ils sont confrontés. Voilà, donc en partenariat avec Bioprotect et les ONG ou les structures qui les accompagnent. Donc, ces questions de recherche vont être formulées avec la recherche. Donc, la recherche va intervenir justement pour rechercher les solutions avec les producteurs et ces producteurs-là vont apprécier ces solutions en les validant sur le terrain. Donc, ils vont mettre en place les parcelles d'essai, d'expérimentation, justement, et ils vont les conduire avec l'appui des chercheurs. Donc, les producteurs deviennent leads et les chercheurs les accompagnent dans la mise en œuvre de ces activités de recherche. Une fois que ces activités de recherche sont menées et validées justement par les agriculteurs, la phase de formation, les ONG réinvestissent encore. Donc, diffusion des producteurs par leurs pairs, diffusion justement par les champs écoles, les outils, etc., etc. Et puis à la phase de commercialisation. Donc, toujours dans la diffusion, il y a ces aspects de formation, de renforcement des capacités que nous faisons à la des formations. Donc là, vous avez des femmes qui produisent de la matière organique. Donc, nous appelons unités rurales de production de matière organique. Donc, c'est des unités économiques qui sont dans les milieux ruraux qui vont produire la matière organique au profit de leurs pairs. Et aussi les outils didactiques que nous faisons au profit des agriculteurs ou des structures d'accompagnement pour aider à la transition agroécologique. Donc, il y a des outils qui traitent du maraîchage écologique, la production des intrants, de plusieurs thématiques vraiment assez variées et diverses pour permettre justement de franchir le cap du changement d'échelle au niveau de la production agroécologique. On peut passer. Suivant, s'il vous plaît. Slide suivante. Bien, donc là, je partage juste avec vous quelques images. Hein. Comme j'ai dit, nous faisons du transfert de technologie. Donc, les solutions que nous avons mis au point avec les agriculteurs, nous les transférons au profit des organisations qui veulent monter de petites unités de production de ces intrants-là. Donc, ce sont ces photos de transfert. Mais aussi, nous accompagnons au développement des marchés écologiques. Facteur qui va permettre aux producteurs d'aller vers la production écologique ou de faire le passage à l'échelle, c'est qu'il y ait un marché qui de développer, de commercialiser des produits issus de l'agroécologie. Donc, nous travaillons sur ce point, notamment en développant des circuits de commercialisation pour les fruits, les légumes, mais aussi les autres produits agricoles. Voilà. C'est l'image de notre modèle de commercialisation de produits écologiques et biologiques. Suivant. Next, please. Voilà, donc c'est juste quelques images, on peut défiler rapidement. Donc, fabrication de micro-organismes efficaces. Voilà, également les micro-organismes avec des groupes de producteurs. Voilà, on peut avancer. Voilà, c'est juste des photos de formation pratique que nous avons réalisées avec des organisations de producteurs qui, par la suite, ont développé une activité économique derrière. Donc là, c'est du bokashi, comme mon prédécesseur parlait tantôt, le bouillon de cendre également, pour permettre le traitement des vergers. Voilà. Voilà, donc je ne saurais terminer sans vraiment remercier la Fondation McKnight et puis AFSA pour l'organisation justement qui nous a donné de nous faire découvrir, mais aussi d'apprendre des autres. Parce que c'est vraiment en apprenant des autres qu'on arrive à faire, et c'est en apprenant des autres qu'on arrive à co-construire quelque chose de durable pour permettre vraiment de faire un passage à l'échelle de l'agroécologie. Je vous remercie pour votre attention et je suis à disposition pour toutes questions utiles. Merci bien.
I'm still muted. Merci beaucoup, Claude Hassen. We're now going to go to Sam Nyanzi. I just had a note from him in the chat saying that he's struggling with power, but he will try and present by his phone. Sam, are you there? Would you like to come on and greet us? I don't know if you can. You're there.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Sam.
I'm there. Yes, Sam.
Yeah, maybe switch off your camera, Sam. We're not getting you.
I'm saying I'm very grateful for this day, and I hope you can share my presentation. But as you share, I'm Nyanzi Samuel. I am a farmer, but also working with farmers, but working at rural community involvement, which is one of the health food centers in Uganda. I'm really, I'm very grateful to be able to present something which is experiences as far as healthy soil, healthy foods, but mainly to look at how our farmers actually can be involved in research, looking at the way we are actually working with biofertilizers, but also working with others. So thank you very much for sharing this information. So I think because we don't have a lot of time, straight away, I want to start my presentation. So can you go to the second slide, please? Second slide, please. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I'm just trying to get back because I wasn't. How do I get back?
Yeah, so as you are trying to actually get to my first slide, really, I want to say, as a background, you see, farmers had really the knowledge. They've been looking at cultivation, as you can see here. They've been looking at farming, and they will have been observing. Because you see, when farmers actually start growing crops, they really observe the yields. The first year is very good. The second year is very good. And then as yield goes on declining, they also say, what are we going to do? So they try to find another way. So as you can see in my introduction, you see, they see that if we are continue producing, we must leave this place to rest and go to another place. So you already find out that looking at the crops, looking at the soil, and farmers deciding is already a gateway to show that farmers, they are actually observing quite a lot about how crops are growing. They are doing observations, and they are trying to see how do we really try to mitigate. They've been doing that through shifting cultivation. So when you are looking at, there is farmers from practice to research, you already see that these farmers, time immemorial, they were looking at research, but they were not actually trying to document. But also you find some other people came and hijacked and actually made them not to be able to continue with the research. So maybe next slide, please. You already see, when you look at this, you see they used to look at the forest, and it was really very green, they could grow, but as
Have we lost Sam?
Is still on. I'm not sure why we can't hear him.
He's dropped. He's dropped.
He's dropped. Okay.
Yeah.
Can we help him? Does anybody have his WhatsApp number or something?
Yeah, I've got his WhatsApp. I'll try.
So John, you want? John, you want?
He's coming back. He's coming back on. He's back on.
He's coming back. Okay. Okay. Great.
I'm back. Yes,
Okay.
I'm back now.
Okay,
I'm back.
well done.
So, if you could help me and give me my screen.
Yeah, I'm sharing now. You should be seeing page 4. Can you see page 4? Seems like
He's dropped again.
He's gone again.
Yeah, we are seeing the introduction page.
So maybe I'll just go through his presentation and you can read it while we wait for him to perhaps get back. And if he doesn't make it back, then we'll go into discussion. So let me just go through it. I'll leave you, oh no, the translators need to translate. So Healthy Soil, Healthy Food Initiative. The advent of Healthy Soil, Healthy Food Initiative reminded the farmer the role of the forest and other virgin lands in improving crop yields and pest and disease management. Healthy Soil, Healthy Foods emphasizes the role of microorganisms in improving and maintaining soil life. It tries to explain the process of photosynthesis and protein synthesis being facilitated by the sun's energy, but also it explains the role of microorganisms in breaking down the complex substances from the organic matter into simpler substances, which can be easily taken up by plants. Okay, there's a picture. So those pictures, I'm sure, are highlighting the role of microbes, different microbes, breaking down, playing their role in breaking down trees and breaking down mulch and so on. More microbes, or the fruit of fungi. You can imagine the promotion of natural farming also encourages beneficial fungi, which adds to the nutrition of the farmer. Such mushrooms are used during traditional ceremonies, but also added to local medicines and delicacies. Support nature, it will feed and support you. The concept leads to the concepts of biofertilizer production, which in the Healthy Soil, Healthy Food Initiative is one of the major components. Biofertilizer production uses the principle of collecting the microorganisms, housing them, feeding them, and releasing them into the fields so that the cultivated land behaves like virgin land, making bokashi a biofertilizer which inoculates fields with different microorganisms. What a farmer wants to understand, such a technology made farmers to become more interested, but also to try out the technology and prove whether it would bring back an increased yield and improved crop health by reducing diseases and pest incidences. Both crops being managed using biofertilizers, and this is making farmers to try out different natural methods which resemble what used to be applicable during the olden days. In conclusion, farmers will always want to improve their indigenous knowledge, if given an opportunity. Farmers have very interesting farming technologies, but they disappear if the researchers take them away and bring them back as new technologies instead of just helping to explain the science behind such technologies. The importance of virgin landscapes and soil fertility has made farmers to go back and imitate, but also support nature, which has brought about high land productivity and healthy crops. So a couple of photos from the center, and thanks from Sam for giving time.
John, it looks like we have Samuel is back in the group.
Oh, great. Sam, are you back? You want to, I mean, I
Thank
just
you,
went through your
John.
presentation. Is there anything you want to, I don't know what you heard, but do you want to say, add anything in summary?
Yeah.
Sam?
In summary, I want to say, in summary, what I can say is that because farmers used really to work with microbes, they didn't understand that they were working with microbes. But because the way microbes were helping them, you find out that now when you bring the Health Food Initiative, whereby we are looking at microorganisms, but also when we are looking at biofertilizers, biostimulation, you find it's almost the same. So it becomes very easy for the farmers actually to start researching and giving us new innovations. So we are saying farmers should be given opportunities actually to try and make research, but this research should be really given back to them, not as new technology from the research station, but as the new findings from the farmers themselves. Once farmers are recognized, you are going to see that we are going to have a lot of knowledge, because these are the people who are interacting with farming, the people who are interacting with biofertilizers, the people who are interacting with biostimulants. And if that happens, then you are going to see that the research is going to be enriched. So I think that's very, very important for us as far as we engage farmers in research. But also we really need to reward the farmers for their research. You see, in most cases, when people come to research, they take the information, but farmers are not rewarded. And the reward is not by actually cash, maybe recognition. For example, if somebody gives a new finding and the researcher explains it, is that research belonging to the researcher or to the farmer? And that's very, very important if you have to involve farmers in research. But as I conclude, I'm saying biofertilizer, biostimulation is something which is reminding our people the olden ways of looking at things and working with things. For example, I think you've seen the mushrooms. Mushroom is our indigenous vegetable. And by the use of microorganisms, by the use of biostimulants, you find farmers have mushrooms all over, all the time, and so many different. So I think I want to end here, and I thank everybody for actually listening. I'm sorry for actually the network has been but I'm very, very grateful for this time. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Sam, and thanks for persisting to get back. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes, I think. I think we started at 10 past the hour. So we've got 15 minutes, and we could go to discussion now. Any comments, any questions, any similar experiences? I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat at the same time. I don't know, you've got a long one there, Steve. Do you want to talk to it?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you.
Great.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, I'll start with noticing that Ferdinand pointed out, I don't know if it was deliberate, but he definitely pointed out that you work also with all these other approaches with the organic inputs and sort of fostering, in my mind, not just the inoculation with microbes, but also that the food for microbes needs to be there. And I wonder whether in your work you've seen soils that that really don't respond to an inoculation because actually there's not a lot of food in that soil and you need to take some other approaches. Because in my mind, just saying that imitating nature also means that when we look at a forest or a grassland, there's a lot of organic material coming in those situations. And sometimes in farming contexts, we don't see that, right? We see soils that are quite depleted of organic matter.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really critical point. I don't know if any of the other three would want to say something. Yeah, I mean, you can waste a lot of bioinoculant if you're putting it onto soil where there's no food for the microbes. Certainly, it's critical to think about that. Yeah, I mean, I should just emphasize that the Healthy Soil, Healthy Food Initiative is looking at the whole spectrum of improving soil and moving towards healthy soils. This is just one focus of an example of how certain practices have been shared from Latin America and spread around the continent. And I didn't want to say, I mean, Ferdinand, what he is doing, what the farmers there are doing is research. It's not that they're not doing it. I just said at the beginning that we're primarily practitioners, not researchers. So it wasn't to say not research. Ferdinand, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I think we're doing a lot of observation, and lucky enough, the inputs that farmers have been using or were using previously, especially if they were using the synthetic inputs, they were not even up to that level that are recommended. And so our soils may not be all that dead. But when we do observation on fields that have bokashi and fields that we've used compost and those that we've not used anything, we see the difference. And I agree, it's important that we increase organic matter, and that maybe previously we thought that it's organic matter that actually feeds the plant. But now we are realizing that it's actually the microbes that actually make the soil living. And I think that in fact changes our thinking when we are applying compost, and how should we apply compost, and how should we prepare compost, and which is the best way to just have a whole systems approach. Thank you.
Great, and I mean, I should add, bokashi is both a fertilizer and an inoculant. It's both playing both roles at once. And I think one of the advantages of bokashi over, say, compost is that within the compost process, you lose quite a lot of the material in the process of making the compost. The idea with bokashi is that you're producing a half-baked material that continues to break down in the soil, so that those processes of breakdown are continuing in the soil. Malik Ba, you've got your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presenter, for the nice presentations. So my question is about insects, soil insects. Is anybody try to document the role of soil insects in these healthy soils? I mean, when you use your bokashi or compost, at some point, I believe some of the soil insects may also play a key role on how the soil get much better in terms of nutrients as compared to those soil that did not get this either bokashi or compost. Any idea? I'm just wondering. Yeah.
We do have results on that in the Kenya AE Hub, and maybe Elizabeth could briefly say that what the bokashi effects were quite positive in that regard. Elizabeth, could you maybe mention?
Referring to the chafer grub situation?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. So in our research, this is at Matterhouse in a replicated trial. We looked at plots with and without bokashi growing both kale and nightshade, and we planted late this year, and we ran into a chafer grub problem. And in the bokashi plots, there was a 32% higher plant population of kales In other words, the bokashi was protecting against the cachefer grub attack. So that was very, seemed like a very positive benefit to us. But I did want to take this opportunity to ask Ferdinand another question. We've been working a lot, not only with bokashi, but with liquid biofertilizers, especially Viro, which is an unenhanced form of supermagro. And I'm wondering, have you been working with liquid biofertilizers? Our results so far are very disappointing. We're seeing no benefits in comparison to a water control. So just wondering how far you are on liquid biofertilizer experimentation.
Yes, thank you. When we were applying our bokashi, we used a lot of our lactic acid bacteria, which is liquid. And we also did not supermagro, but just the basic biofertilizer, the fermented one, with the solid native microbes. And that made the difference. And when we were comparing this with the fields that we've done the compost, we're just doing the normal compost teas and just the normal compost manure from the animal pens. That is actually what we did. And we've also noticed that even on vegetables, when we are applying the lactic acid bacteria, especially on beans and the cowpeas, that they are able to withstand the cold situations and frost, and they are able to remain healthy throughout the cold season. And because it's during the cold season that they actually have a lot of the rusts. And that's just another observation that we've made, and that is it.
Great, thanks, Ferdinand. Sam, do you want to say something, and then Rick?
What I want actually to talk about, for example, when you are talking about biofertilizers, biostimulants, I think it is very, very important really to have a variety, because each of, for example, the plant requires maybe specific microbe. And that's why we really need to ensure that we are trying to collect microbe is very, very important. Feeding microbe is very, very important, and multiplying it. Once you collect the right microbe, you feed the right microbe, and you actually grow them, then when you take them in the garden, because you are not just taking very little, you take quite a lot. For example, in bokashi, there are a lot of microbes. There are also microbes in native microbes, solid, native microbe, liquid. So you have a variety. And that's why, personally, I'm looking at the fermented anaerobically, because the anaerobic fermentation is actually trying to have both anaerobic and aerobic microbes. So when you release them in the garden, even when the soil is so much depleted, but because you have already have these microbes which can withstand different conditions, you find out that they will be able to fight and multiply. But what is very critical now, I think I'm taking weeds. If we say that we are going to work in the same way as the conventional way of working, we might have problems. But for example, if I'm spraying biostimulants, I have to really also support nature. The nature must be supported.
Thanks, Sam. Rick?
For example, you look at the weeds which are growing, support them, and also see how you can they can also.
Yeah, you're starting to fade out, Sam. Thanks a lot. Rick, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to just elaborate a little bit on something I put in the comment. First of all, you introduced John by saying, you know, we're practitioners rather than researchers, and yet very interesting research has been presented. And the elements of research are you know, taking careful observations and thinking about what you're seeing and what it means, and then asking a new question and taking observations that will allow you to answer that. And it seems that all the presenters have been doing that. So it's important not to think that research means going off and having scientists with PhDs doing things in laboratories. Right. Now, what you can do with a research approach is start to answer these questions that people are asking, even here in the chat, about what about this, what about that? You know, is it these microbes or is it that one? Is it lactic acid microbes or is it something else? Is it the nutrient effect? Is it the organic matter effect? What's the additional effect of the microbes compared to the organic matter without microbes, and so on? And those are the sorts of questions within the context you've got that are actually quite straightforward to try and answer by making these maybe sometimes slightly artificial comparisons. In other words, making up a mixture which you've deliberately excluded some matter. Maybe making bokashi and then pasteurizing it so that you've got the nutrients, but you haven't got the microbes in there. And when you do that kind of thing, you get more insights into the biology and the mechanisms. And that's what allows you to then improve things even further.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Rick. And just to clarify, I said primarily practitioners. I didn't exclude the research. So what Ferdinand is doing is research. I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite an overwhelming world, this world of biofertilizers, bioinoculants, biostimulants, and I think research could play a huge role to help narrow things down a bit, because the choices are huge. What do you use? What do you choose? I mean, it's quite interesting, the program in Andhra Pradesh, who we're working quite closely with now and exchanging information. They saw this overwhelming world of bioinoculants and so on, and they have developed a set of practices that they recommend to farmers just to help them get going so that they're not overwhelmed by the choice. And they've looked carefully at which ones to recommend. So I think there's a good role there for that. And I think just to Elizabeth's point about the supermagro, I think the thing is that those fermented biofertilizers, it depends on the quality. They can vary hugely. It depends what it's been made with and what's gone into it, how well it's been made. So I think that's also important but maybe you are checking that quality. So I'm afraid we're getting to the end of our time. So thank you very much to the presenters. Thank you very much to CCRP and the FRN network, and to Mary and everyone there. We have, as AFSA, we are in the process of establishing and building a relationship with CCRP. And I think I see this as part of that process. And we really look forward to working together more. I think the FRN methodology could be enormously useful for us in AFSA and in the Healthy Soil and Healthy Food initiative. So thanks very much for inviting us.